Welcome to Sasquatch Island. My name is Tom Seawood. I'll be your host, sharing with you my personal experiences and perspectives pertaining to Sasquatch, otherwise known as Bigfoot. Sasquatch Island, I've been operating it for about 6 years now. It's a Facebook group. It has a YouTube channel, which I'm on right now, Sasquatch Island. And used I used to have a podcast series called Sasquatch Island with Monster X Radio, which you can still go listen to on monsterxradio.com in their archives, Sasquatch Island. But right now, this is my first live video cast, I guess you could say, in my studio. And you'll see behind me uh, different things that are Sasquatch related. I do a lot of West Coast native art, like this one right here of Sasquatch carrying two salmon. And I have other designs I've done. You can go to SasquatchTheLegend.com. They have a Sasquatch gift store in Forks, Washington, but they have about 8 of my West Coast native Indian designs of Sasquatch, which we call Chunahwa, from my tribe of the Kwakwaka'wakw from northeastern Vancouver Island. That's just a little bit about me. I lived in the bush for quite a few years, well over 20 years, in what they call the Broughton Archipelago. It's off the northeast side of Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and it is part of it is the traditional territories of my Kwakwaka'wakw tribe called the Mamlecha. And we have a famous abandoned native village called Village Island, or Mamalalakula, Village of the Last Potlatch, in history books and so forth. But to our people, we call it Nimkamlis, the village with the rocks and the islands out front. And it had totem poles that were falling down on the ground. Big house beam remains are still standing in one spot of the village. And there was numerous old abandoned homes, but a lot of them have caved in over the years from rot and snow and wind. But I lived out there, and I used to sit there sometimes in my little 26-foot trailer with a 10 by 10-foot addition. And I would plug my ears at night going, la, 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 I don't hear that. I don't hear that. Go to sleep. And it was the roars and the whoops of Sasquatches. I'd always known they're out there. And it wasn't until, I guess, early 1990s when we had our first encounter. I didn't see that one. But a couple years later, at the same place called Native Anchorage on Village Island, I was anchored out with my commercial fish boat. And I got to see, when I turned my spotlight on, 2 large Sasquatch, one big male and one big female. And they were on the beach for some 20 minutes. They wouldn't move with the spotlight on, but as soon as we turned it off, we could hear them move through the grass and the shrubs at the beach edge. And then they entered the forest, and you could hear them crack and break sticks and so forth as they were walking. And then we heard a large dead tree push down. I guess you could say that was the first time that I ever encountered aggression from a Sasquatch. And, it was something else to experience. And through the years, I would have other encounters where in 2006, we had 2 or 3 Sasquatch chase us out of my sea kayak camp on eastern Vancouver Island, just north of Kelsey Bay or Sayward. You can look on the map there. Or you can email me and I can give you the exact place, because my 5 cabins are still there and I still use it from time to time. We do Sasquatch expeditions down there in those 5 cabins that look like native style long houses or big houses, and I have native designs on 3 of them. But it's a hot spot of activity, and it's because it's where the Sasquatches swim to and from Vancouver Island to the islands and inlet chains, because Sasquatchers are always in seasonal migration in the Pacific Northwest and the coastal region. I can't speak for other areas of North America, or what I call Sasquatch Island, because we Indians in North America, we have stories that talk about North America being called Turtle Island because it looks like a turtle from space. I'm not going to get into the UFO stuff and how our ancestors got into that. But because the Indian people refer to North America as Turtle Island, I call it Sasquatch Island, because everyone, Indian and non-Indian, have stories about the big hair-covered bipedal creatures known as Sasquatch, Bigfoot, and other names. But this videocast today is to answer a question of what is a rogue Sasquatch? Well, this is just my opinion based on decades being out in the bush, having quite a few encounters with Sasquatch, and doing countless interviews with people throughout my entire life, and I still do. And we know about David Paulides, who has his missing 411, and he, foreshadows, I guess, or alludes to some of these people may have went missing from Sasquatches. And then we have the North American Indian stories that speak of their women and children being taken away by Sasquatches. And even to this day, a lot of tribes are apprehensive to talk about the Sasquatch in their traditional territories. Some of it is because it's considered to be taboo or bad medicine to speak about them. And in other cases, it's just because they don't want to share what they know is going on in their backyards. When Vancouver Island, for example, we have a rest stop on the Island Highway just north of Campbell River and just north of Roberts Lake on the Big Tree Creek that is all barricaded with cement blocks about 4 foot by 4 foot by, I guess, 6 feet long. And the cement picnic tables and outhouse facilities and garbage cans have been removed for almost 5 years now. Rumor has it a woman was found there, and it was kept off the media that she had been killed by being decapitated, her left arm removed, and her body pummeled, her clothing intact, but she wasn't sexually abused. But the police told the family to keep it out of the media and so forth, and it was covered up. There's another missing person on Vancouver Island that I've heard about recently in the last 5 years that they suspect a Sasquatch took that young man as well. And of course, many other stories that you hear about that through the tribes. We can talk about, I think it's Skookum Harry out on the west coast of Vancouver Island back in early 1900s, who was kidnapped by Sasquatches. When I was in Omaha Indian Reservation in Nebraska, in a small community called Macy, about 3 years ago, I met a gentleman, an Omaha tribe member by the name of Lucas White, who's a very good friend of mine now. When I met him, he shared with me stories about Sitonga, their Sasquatch in the Indian Reservation. And he shared with me how, as a young boy of around 11 or so, he went into his father's house, who was raising him, and he wouldn't wake up. So he ran to the neighbors over a mile away, and they brought Lucas back to the house, and they covered his father with a blanket and told him that his father had passed. Police and social workers came, and they took Lucas to his mother's house, but she didn't want Lucas or any of the other kids. And she took him, but a few hours later, Lucas saw the police and social workers show up, and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't do this. I can't raise you." And he was taken off the Indian Reserve and brought over 20 miles away to a farm with an elderly couple who weren't Indian, and they were his foster parents to look after him. He was in such shock and turmoil that he would run away that night in March, and it would take him almost 3 days to make his way back to Macy, Nebraska, to the Indian Reserve of the Omaha people. And there he would play with his cousins, and the aunt and uncle would come out and shoo him away because they were afraid that the police or social services would show up and they would take their children away or put them in the parents in jail because they were harboring runaway. So Lucas left, and he slept in an abandoned house in Macy, Nebraska, and he actually showed it to me a few years ago. It was fallen down and dilapidated, but he showed me where he spent his first night. And as he was trying to sleep on the floor of this abandoned, broken down house, the pack dogs of the reservation tried to come in and growling and everything, and Lucas had to hide in the closet and close the door. The next morning he got up and he played in the forest around the edge of the village. And that night he went to his grandfather's house and slept in the forks of either a walnut or a chestnut tree. And next morning when he woke up, his grandfather was poking him with a stick and told him to come down and gave him some money and food and said, "Lucas, you can't be here. You have to go out in the forest and stay there until it gets cold in September, October, then come back in and be apprehended by the police and social services and be brought to foster care through the winter and go to school, and the next spring see what you want to do." Well, his entire life until he was an adult, his MO was to run away every March from foster care, live in the forest in and around Mason, Nebraska on the Omaha Indian Reserve, and in the September, October, be apprehended and go to foster care. I questioned him, what about the Sitonga? And he's told me all kinds of stories about how one came to him when he was in this abandoned house out in the forest. And I just said, Lucas, those Sasquatches, they helped you, didn't they? They watched over you. And he said, Tom, I have a lot of things to tell you, but in time. When I returned, I would email Dr. Jeff Meldrum, Dr. John Bindernagel, he was alive then, my good friend, Les Stroud, and Todd Neese. And that email I sent to those 4 investigators was titled, I Have Found Tarzan. That's Lucas White. He has been in and around Sasquatches, and he's taught me so much, what he calls Sitonga, their Sasquatch. He taught me that there's harvesters, there's hunters, there's scouts, and there's rogues. You do not want to be around rogues. And he didn't elaborate too much other than to say, if you go to an area and find a hole in the forest in his Indian reservation and all kinds of coyote and deer bones and guinea hens, I think they're called, and wild turkey, that's where rogue is laid up in a hole and it jumps on the animals to eat them. And there's a big accumulation of bones. And I've seen that on Vancouver Island. I've seen an area deep in the forest when I was out doing some harvesting of chanterelle mushrooms. And we got quite far back and we went up a small knoll, I guess you could say, a hill. And we got above the rocks. We found an area where there was a lot of feces in one spot and almost like a rectangle, about 6 feet long and about 3 feet wide. But this entire area was just filled with elk, deer, bear, and even cougar bones and bird feathers and everything. And we had a really uneasy feeling and we got out of there. And, we're leaving a different direction. We came across big tracks of a Sasquatch. So I think that was a rogue's area where it was laid up. But what is a rogue? So let's go back to, I'll speak to the males, what it's like when your mate, your girlfriend, your wife points to the door and tells you to get the heck out. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. And the next thing you find out is everything you've worked hard for, be it a mortgage for a house, the money you put into rent and fixtures in the house and furniture and everything, you don't have access to it. The woman takes it all. In many cases, that's what happens. Us men get the short end of the stick, and usually we do it by choice because there's children involved, and we're not going to take from our kids. I went through that. I was sued in 2007 for $600 and something thousand. I watched the sheriff in Canada on Vancouver Island come seize my kayak fleet worth over $23,000. The boat that my common law wife, the mother of my children, we had built for us in 2003 worth over $180,000, a 12-passenger aluminum tour boat. And our house was yellow stickered and seized. Over $50,000 we had liquid in 2 bank accounts in the Campbell River. Were garnished overnight. And overnight I went from working my way to almost being a millionaire in a few years to being a flat, broke, bankrupt Indian, just like that. And I lost all my material wealth. I lost my home. I lost my boat. I lost my kayak. I've lost my ability to make money and feed my children. Thank God, Kathleen, the mother of my children, my common law at the time, had a social work degree. Go figure. So anyway, she took a job with Haida Child and Family Services on Queen Charlotte Islands, known now as Haida Gwaii. And we got money to take a 26-foot long truck with all of our possessions and our Jeep Cherokee with the kids and our dog, and off we went to Haida Gwaii. And we arrived there in March of 07, and in May of 07, and in March of 08, Kathleen pointed to the door and told me to get the heck out of there. She didn't want to be with me no more. I filled up the Jeep Cherokee with my guns that I had, my fishing gear, my bush gear, and a few other possessions like carving tools and so forth. And I drove on the ferry and I returned to northern Vancouver Island. And when I got into driving from the ferry in Port Hardy, some 2.5, 3 hours south to Campbell River, I had some very nasty thoughts in my mind. And I had some things I wanted to do to people that hurt me. And they were very dark thoughts. And as I drove into Campbell River, there was a hotel that I got to at an intersection that the manager would always put monthly positive quotes for life up on this big billboard. And when I got to the red light, I looked at that billboard and it said, "Success will not be defined on how high you reach, but on how high you bounce when you've hit rock bottom." And that's when my mind changed. I started to go on a positive path and I said, this is my time to bounce, and I shall bounce and continue to bounce and get higher and higher in life again, because I am right now in the darkest, deepest depths right now. And that's what I've been doing. And that's why I share with you all my knowledge about living in the bush and my experiences with Sasquatches and my ponderings from piecing reports together and everything. It's part of the bounce to share with you so you don't make the mistakes I made. Please don't get sued for defamation of character and slander. It costs you a hell of a lot of money. But when you're out there Sasquatch investigating, always be respectful of them. Never, ever go out there to harm them or to hunt them. And if you do get close to them, it's a great moment. Hopefully capture it with what I'm going to be teaching you in these video casts and my podcasts on how to get closer so you can get some good video and everything and pictures and maybe audio. So anyway, the rogues, when I came back after I lost my ability to have my children under my roof again, because remember, Kathleen is a social worker, and we Indians fear two things in life. Police take us to jail, our parents as well, and social workers take our children. So here I was, common law, married to a social worker who, after I left, I knew I would never have my children under my roof again. I never would. They would come visit from time to time. I had to go to another province to see them for many years. Now they're back on Vancouver Island. One doesn't really speak to me. The other one, we have my son. We have a relationship, but it's not the smoothest that could be. But oh well, that's life, and we all make our decisions, and hopefully they'll smarten up one day. But that time that I was in that angry state of losing everything, home, business, money, everything, my pride, I became a bankrupt, flat broke Indian, and no way was I going to collect welfare. So I went back to the bush. I went rogue. I lived out there. I didn't want anything to do with humans. But when I think back to a time in the early 1990s when I had something traumatic happen in my life again, where I had a big bill from IRS Canada, which is Revenue Canada up there. And there was no way I was going to pay that money because I was a commercial fisherman, and I won't get into it. But anyway, it was an astronomical amount of money I had to pay back, and I couldn't. And I just said, I'm tired of the concrete. And I went into the bush and I became a hunting guide for specializing in bears, black and grizzly bear, deer, cougar, wolf, fishing guide, doing fishing charters, and during the summer running an ecotourism operation in that abandoned native village of my tribe. So to me, I always call it, I progressed back to bush, because here in the concrete, I'm in Kent, Washington right now with my common law wife, Peggy. A lot of people know as Peggy Seaview, and she investigates with me, and she's well known in the Sasquatch Bigfoot community of us humans. But anyway, I'm here in Kent, Washington, and, you know, I hate the concrete. Monday and day after tomorrow, we head back to Canada, and we're going to get some bush and water time. I'm looking forward to that. But I remember those times when I was in bush for months, and I remember pulling a branch down and looking, because I could smell coffee and cigarette smoke, and I could hear the twiddling chirp of a woman's voice. And when I looked, I could see foresters sitting there having a lunch break, thermoses open, smoking cigarettes, some of them eating sandwiches. And here I'd been living off the bush for weeks, and I'd been out of cigarettes and coffee for many weeks. But as much as I wanted that, I just let the branch up. I turned, and I walked away. I didn't want to be around humans. I despised them. I hated them. I loathed them. Non-Indian humans to me at that time in my life were of no interest, nor was the concrete and civilized world. And I know what it's like to be rogue, to be so filled with fury and anger that you don't want to interact with humans. Well, let's look at the Sasquatches as a whole. We can honestly say the entire clan of a Sasquatch community are rogue because they despise us, hate us, loathe us. They don't want to be around us, disease-ridden, environmental destroyers, parasites of the planet, humans, the hairless bipedal. Sasquatches, on the other hand, are more in tune with the environment, nature. They live with everything in the elements. They don't have clothing. They don't have weapons, as far as we can tell. They don't use fire, from what we have found in our investigations in the most part. And they don't seem to have war, because we've never documented any mass Sasquatch group to another group fighting. We have, had people seen 2 or 3 fighting, it's probably over mating and so forth, and maybe a territorial dispute. We can only speculate at this point. But the Sasquatches that have a clan, let's look at the bush code. The bush code, number one, I'm going to teach you is everything in the bush will get pooped out eventually, whether it's a worm, a bug, a bird, a butterfly, an ungulate, a bear, a wolf, a cougar, a Sasquatch. Everything gets pooped out. Even a human that dies out there will be consumed by a multitude of creatures for nourishment, and eventually they will all defecate and poop us out. So the bush code is everything dies and everything gets eaten. And in the bush, when you have a pack of wolves or a family unit, and even we Kwakwaka'wakw in the old days, you'd have ousting of chiefs. So the bush code, and like we see with lions and hyenas and all that, is the bush code is the alpha male will eventually be challenged by a younger, more stronger male and be toppled. Now, the toppled alpha male of a group has a choice to stay with the fringes of the group, never being included in the community no more closely, and it has to eat the scraps. It's lower than the least tiered position within that pack, the pups, and they have to grovel away and eat the scraps like a raven or a vulture. Or they can have another choice. They can leave. Now, a great example of this is a Finnish photographer. If you Google grizzly bear and wolf, Finland, this Finnish photographer took pictures of a big grizzly bear, big male, with a big black male wolf. I've seen that out in the forest in my time, how a grizzly bear that has abscessed teeth and he barely moves, he's just because he's so arthritis up, and he'll team up, or a wolf will team up with him, and you'll see their tracks together. You'll see them together. You'll see the wolf chase a deer, and they'll work together to bring that animal down. And that's nature's code that we have no comprehension of. So the rogues to me are those displaced clan leaders. And like I was, and many other males, when they get displaced as a family leader from the wife or girlfriend saying, get the beep out of here. You now have to go to court to see your children. You have to pay this much money. Your money that was in a bank account and the equity in the house is now not yours. And we know all the negative ramifications of that to many, many males and females included. And we know some people that snap. And, I'm not going to get into great detail, but we see on the news and reading the newspaper of the tragedy of someone with a firearm or a knife or their hands, that they have gotten so angry that they just lose it. Well, I think that's what a rogue Sasquatch is. It's PO'd to the max over us humans because we're destroying their environment, our environment, clear cutting, fracking, urban sprawl, mining, the list goes on. And then on top of that, they get displaced as clan leader. They can't have close contact with their clan because it seems to be the norm in the bush code with wolves and other animals that pack up. And so now they're not being close to their children or their grandchildren, their mate. And I think those Sasquatches snap. And that's what makes the very aggressive rogue that we hear stories about. And we hear the stories of humans that go missing, the houses being banged upon, the rocks being thrown at people. In some cases, they describe it as a big single male. And there's other reports of this one area in the Broughton Archipelago, in my traditional territories. We have 2 islands where we know a rogue Sasquatch lives. And I went chanterelle picking there one year, over a decade ago, and he threw rocks and sticks at me, and I got the heck out of there. A friend of mine had his boat anchored out in the harbor with a bunch of yachts in the summer, and a Sasquatch threw a piece of driftwood and knocked the top part of his Dutch door right off the hinges of his boat. I can't remember how many yards he was offshore, but it was a phenomenal throw. And that's a rogue Sasquatch. That's my opinion of what I think a rogue Sasquatch is. And, from my experience, when the Sasquatch gets all aggressive on you, like I had happened a few times, that when a Sasquatch shakes trees, throws things at you, pushes a dead tree at you, vocalizes, tree snaps, the native people were trained respect. You respect that Sasquatch. You turn 180, you walk, and you get out of there. That's a Sasquatch telling you, I don't want you humans here. Well, what happens if they don't heed those warnings and they keep going forward? I think those are the ones that end up in the statistics and end up in David Paulides' book, Missing 411, whatever volume he has now. So be very respectful of the Sasquatch, but also heed the warning of Lucas White and me. If you think it's a rogue that you're around, you see a bunch of bones, you see a blind where they're set up, where they're jumping animals, you smell the rotten carrion, you notice that it's deer bone and elk bone and bear bone, coyote. It's not normal for wolves to kill in one place, or bears. They're not going to drag their food to their habitation site like we humans. And it seems to be that the rogues are the ones that do that. And possibly, maybe it's a sign from them telling animals and humans, stay the hell out of here. I'm here right now and I'm a rogue. And big grizzly bears, when I used to be a hunting guide, you didn't go where the main grizzly bears were in the river to get a trophy grizzly, because those were all the mums and cubs and the sub-adult males and dried up females. You would go find a little tributary creek and you'd go through the Devil's Club and the stinging nettles and the brush, and you'd push up this ditch where you see salmon carcasses, and then all of a sudden you see more carcasses that are chewed, and you'd be super stealth, and you watch and you try to get up on the bank so you're elevated, and next thing you know, you look and there's a big grizzly bear lying in a sandbar with 4 or 5 inches of water, and he's just reaching out, grabbing the salmon, going by him. But in that really overgrown area, any animal or human gets in there, that big dominant grizzly bear is going to go rogue on your butt now. Code of the bush, rogues. Now I've just taught you a little bit from my experiences, investigations where I interview countless fellow First Nations and other people. And if you have anything to add to that, by all means, please email me at tom.sewid@gmail.com, tom.sewid. Once I get familiar with this program or other ones, I'll be able to put the subtitles up. My wife can do it. I can't. But hopefully you've enjoyed this. I see a bunch of comments on the side, and I'm definitely going to go through them and read. But we're up to 30 minutes now, so I think I'll end for now. But just remember, hit the share button. Tell other people about Sasquatch Island on Facebook, our YouTube channel, Sasquatch Island. I podcast with monsterxradio.com. All my art you can buy, like that design there and others. And through the videos, I'll be sharing them with you for sure. And chatter like a Sasquatch. Tell others about Sasquatch Island. Tom Sewid, where to find me. And don't forget to hit that bell icon, because I'm going to be doing a lot of videos now. I'm going to be doing some from the road when I'm in Vancouver Island over the next week and a half. And I'll be sharing other things with you. I'll use my phone for this and show you some totem poles maybe with Jonacha and other things. And always be respectful of the Sasquatches. Heed their warnings. Turn 180. Get out of there. and be respectful of them, and don't ever try to harm or hurt them, or don't ever hunt them. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Slap it upside like a rogue Sasquatch will slap a disrespectful investigator upside the head. I thank you very much. In the language of my people, halakulasla. Go in peace.